There's something huge happening in the sports card community this August. It's the first Fanatics Fest, and it's taking place August 16th through 18th in New York City. They say this is going to be a first-of-its-kind event, bringing together sports fans and collectors in an immersive celebration. And they have more than 200 of the biggest athletes from around the world coming to this event. So what's it really going to be like? What is this actually all about? Well, guess what? We're going to find that out right now, because we have the CEO of Fanatics Events, Lance Fensterman, coming on this show to give us all of the inside details about Fanatics Fest. Let's get started. Lance, welcome to the Geoff Wilson Show.
Great to be here. Longtime listener and viewer, first-time guest. This is awesome.
Hey, look at that. Super excited for that and really excited to bring this information to our audience today. There's a lot of buzz and excitement about Fanatics Fest, but also there's a lot of uncertainty about what exactly it is, what this is going to be like, what it is going to feel like being at the event. And today we're going to pull the covers back on that, which is pretty cool. So I guess, first of all, I want to give everybody a taste of your background, because I think it's very relevant as you start to describe this event, right? You're the founder of another very famous event. Tell everybody about that.
You're talking about my 10th birthday party, right? Because it was
right, exactly.
Huge to do. No, my background, I helped create New York Comic Con in 2007 era. Out of that, we ended up building a company called Reed Pop, which was a little tiny weird offshoot of a big trade show event company. And we started launching pop culture events really all over the world, video game shows, Comic-Con events. We actually created Complex Con. We had to deal with UFC and Star Wars. And so over the course of 17 years, really building this company, we had about 50 events all over the world that was catering to really hardcore, passionate fan communities. And as the legend goes, Michael Rubin went to New York Comic Con one year and was like, why don't we have this for sports? Why isn't there a big platform where all of the community and fans come together like there is for a Comic Con or for South by Southwest for music and film and television or CES for tech? And he called me up and, I don't know if you know this, but Michael can be a fairly convincing dude. And the next thing you know, I'm coming to Fanatics every day and working on this new concept for him.
Cool. And I know it's been well over a year since you started working on this concept. We had the opportunity to meet last summer, and that's when it was kind of in its initial, very early, planning phases of this whole thing. So, we're sitting here now kind of a year after that moment where we got together. And it's finally getting close. Like, the event obviously is established, Fanatics Fest. It's actually happening. What was the year like? That's a long time for it to take to get a new event off the ground. But I guess an event of this magnitude takes that.
It does. And just to check us, as time of our conversation, we are 65 days, 18 hours, and 19 minutes away from Fanatics Fest. Not that I have a clock on my wall constantly haunting my dreams, but there it is. So really, events of this scale typically are about a year to build. And so it's not uncommon to have that kind of a runway. But what we really spent the last year doing was, first of all, understanding the fan community, right? Understanding the sort of different segments that exist, whether they are hardcore collectors or they're hardcore sports fans or they're casual sports fans or they only collect certain types of things. We wanted to get a real, as deep as we could, of an understanding of the community that we want to serve. Because as we get into it, there's lots of entities at this show, and it's all very exciting. But at the end of the day, the only thing that ultimately matters is, are the fans, are the collectors excited? Are they happy? Are they there? Because if they're not, nothing else really matters. So we spent a lot of time really kind of trying to understand what drives these different fans and what they want. What's different from what's in the marketplace? Because there's some amazing events in the space, particularly collectibles, that we're not looking to replicate that. We're not looking to compete with that. We want to create something new and unique and add to the community. And that takes time. And I think if you shortcut it, you're doing a real disservice to the fans, to the community, and then ultimately to ourselves as well. But the other piece is, Fanatics is as big and dynamic of an organization as it is. They've not ever done anything like this. So there was a lot of, and there still is a lot of kind of internal explaining and wrangling and helping folks understand. And then the last thing I'd say is we spent a year building a team. I was but one humble, not that bright of a man, so I needed to surround myself with people that know how to do this and are really passionate about it. So we built up a small but mighty team, and now we're finally ready to go. And to be fair, we also did run an event. We ran WWE World, which was an immersive 4 or 5 day event for WWE fans that sat next to WrestleMania, and that was in April in Philly. So we've started to kind of get our teeth sharpened a bit and get our feet wet and kind of get moving. And now here we are on the precipice, 65 days, ready to go.
It's exciting. It's definitely exciting. Okay, so you just said something I thought was interesting. You said, hey, there's a lot of other good collectible events out there. You're not looking to replace those. You're going to add something new. A lot of people obviously are going to draw comparisons to the National. The National has been kind of the pinnacle event in the sports card collecting community for 40 years now. And your event is positioned just a few weeks after the National. So there's a natural kind of comparison point there. When people, well, I guess first of all, so you're not trying to replace the National. You're not trying to create it. You're not trying to create the National 2.0. You're trying to create something totally different.
Correct. And absolutely. Like we revere the National. We respect the card shows that are out in the marketplace. We attend them. We're fans of them. We're really trying to think about how do we add. And also I think there's some comparisons to when we started New York Comic Con. There was a lot of great Comic Cons, right? People don't really realize Comic Con is not a brand. It's a descriptor, right? And there's thousands of Comic-Con events across America. And they were all smaller, a little more grassroots, fan run, and they were great. We wanted to create something that was a little more broad and that really brought new people into the world of popular culture as fans and collectors. And we're looking at this opportunity in a bit of a similar way, which is to say, like, the events that exist are unbelievably great events, and the people that they serve really, really well. We have zero interest in upsetting that ecosystem in any way, shape, or form. However, those events that exist are not always as great at bringing new people into the hobby, or new people into collecting or memorabilia, or even sort of giving them a space to celebrate their fandom in lots of different kind of stripes or versions, right? And so we looked at it as our number one sort of goal is, how do we grow the hobby, right? I mean, that's Fanatics Collectibles' goal. How do we grow the hobby? We're looking at it as, how do we help onboard new collectors, new fans into this world? And that's good for everyone. And that's the kind of unique take on it. So, the National is an unbelievable event that is full of history and is, the Super Bowl of collecting. We'll be there just like we were last year. Fanatics will be there. They're not ever going to not be there because we're building out live events. We're really thinking about this as a different sort of beast that serves different goals and different purposes.
Okay, that's great to know. Appreciate the clarification on that. So if you are going wider, if you're looking at this event as the opportunity to bring new people into collecting, to capture maybe the everyday sports fan and to allow them to maybe enter them into the collecting world, how, from kind of a look and feel and experience standpoint, is this event going to do that?
Yeah, we're really focused on, first of all, we've kind of gone through it. I said we spent all this time thinking about fans and trying to really understand them. We've built out a handful of personas that we believe are the kind of the target for this show. And one of them is for sure like hardcore collectors, but probably in a slightly more new age bend, if you will, that are probably open to breaking and other things like that. That's not saying that more old school fans are not welcome or old school collectors, not at all. But I think that there's probably a little bit of a lean in that more kind of modern direction, suppose, than the classic direction. But we really think of this as saying, how do we build around a hardcore community of collectors of all different types and start to add in concentric circles of content and experience and brands and personalities that will then draw in perhaps more casual fans, fans of culture or apparel more than they are of just collectibles. And if we can get them in the room, right? It's a big room at the Javits, but if we can get them in the room, how do we then sort of pull them towards collecting? How can we find a hook that explains to them what the hobby is about and why it's relevant to them? And so if we can draw them in and then we can figure out a way to onboard them, that's a great way to grow the hobby. And some of those examples are like, we really feel like content, talks, panels, conversations, podcasts. These are really enticing ways for someone to come and experience entertainment, right? Or meet a celebrity or an athlete or someone that they admire, and sort of get immersed into that story. That's a great hook for a more casual fan, as are great interactive experiences, whether it's the NFL bringing the 40-yard dash experience that they did at the Super Bowl to this show. So families can come and kids have stuff to do. And there's a kids zone at the back and there's autographing and there's a gaming lounge. Now you're talking about really immersive entertainment and collecting, not just collecting. And that starts to appeal to a different type of fan and a different potential or future collector.
That's really interesting. So a couple of things that are a lot different, based on what you're saying there than what you might see at a typical card show today. So first of all, the idea of having like a stage with content, that is done some. The National has a stage. I've been to other card shows like Culture Collision in Atlanta that have a stage, but
Great
typically they're not a focal point by any means. Like, and honestly, like very few people kind of stop and pay attention to the stage. It's like 99% the card show, and then there's this little stage in the corner that a couple people stop by. I looked at your agenda that, and obviously information's still coming out, but it looks like you've got multiple stages. You've got a lot of different athletes and celebrities and influencers that are going to be on those stages. You're really leaning into that. Why? How is that? How do you see that playing out here differently than what you've seen at other card shows in the past?
Yeah. Well, our hope is that the content will define a little bit of what the show is, right? When you see, Brady and Jeter and the Manning brothers and Sabrina Ionescu and Gary Vee and these people in sort of high level conversations, it starts to tell you that this isn't just a card show. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, if you admire an athlete for their entrepreneurial ventures as much as their on-field, on-court success, like, this is a space, this event could be exciting for you, right? You'll have a chance to hear a conversation between two luminaries that you just don't get every day. The story behind the story, the off the court, off the field inspiration, passion, and story, right? Oh, and also you can go get exclusive products and see cool collabs between awesome brands, and you can get memorabilia signed. And whether you know it or not, you can discover the beauty of collecting cards, right? I think what it says is, if we've got 4 or 5 personas of fan that we love for this show, what are the different hooks? What are the things that are going to appeal to those fans? And I know it's like a little bit of a cliche, but that Taylor Swift football fan, like that type of fan that says I love the fashion side of sport, right? Because that exists, not necessarily just the sport and the sport. Those sorts of fans have a place here, right? Those sorts of fans are the collectors of tomorrow if we can engage them and excite them. And that's what we're trying to do, is think about how do we lead with that immersive experience, that entertainment, that content, as well as collecting and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because a lot of card shows have athletes, big name athletes, who come to the card shows to do autograph appearances. They never get on stage. They're never the ones doing the talks. They're never the ones being interviewed in front of the audience. The athletes are always over in a corner. You have to, buy a ticket, and then they'll go sign something and spend, 20 seconds with you. This sounds different. This sounds like you're actually taking the athletes and you're putting them on the stage and you're making them a focal point for people to be able to hear from, rather than just having them do autographs off in the corner.
Correct. And I think one great challenge we've got is that's not normal. Like, that's not typical. That hasn't been done. And so, one of the reasons I love being here right now is not just because I enjoy you and love, your show and getting to chat with you, but I want to tell the story, because this isn't typical, right? It's not like every other show. And it's going to take people, I think, a minute to figure out, all right, what is this? And Fanatic's name is on it because it's that Fanatic's vision. And Fanatics is investing to make it happen. But this is a show for everyone, right? This is a show for every brand, every fan. And we want to tell the story of why this is a little different. And we think additive, and frankly needed. There just isn't anything like it. That unifying platform for an industry, for a space that allows for announcements to be made, stories to be told, fans to be created, right? Media to gather, business to get done. It doesn't happen in sport the way it happens in some of those other industries that I've talked about. And I think that Fanatics is in a unique position. It's why I'm here. It's why I took the call from Michael and Tucker. Fanatics is in a unique position to put down some of the bedrock, right? That then, as an industry, we can build on and create something really cool, because of Topps and Mitchell and Ness, and obviously the commerce business and the relationship we have with athletes. It means there's a lot to start with, and then it's been getting everyone else to understand, get excited, and get engaged, so that we can have that big kind of industry-wide, community-wide platform. It's an ambitious goal.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, though. It definitely is a little bit of a different approach than what we're used to in the card community. Another thing you said when you were describing the event a few minutes ago, that I got the feeling you were talking about the Super Bowl experience. I've been to more than a card show, right? I've been to, at card shows, you don't see interactive experiences. You don't see, exhibits that might have a basketball court or might have a kids zone where kids are running around or doing I think you said a 40-yard dash competition. These are the things. I went to the Super Bowl experience a few years ago, and those were the things you felt at the Super Bowl experience. It was fun. It was awesome. It was great. And my kids had a blast at it, but that's much different than a card show. But it sounds like you're kind of bringing more of that world over and saying we're trying to create that experience and combine it with the card show.
Yeah. And, some of that is being innovative. Some of it is not. It's saying, I think about what we built in Comic-Cons and our video game shows too. And it has to be a great diverse array of experiences. This is immersive entertainment at the end of the day, right? And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But you don't want to ask someone to buy a ticket to just come in and buy things, right? If it's an amazing collection of dealers, that's wonderful. There's value there. But we're also asking for people to buy a more expensive ticket, in a more expensive city, in a more expensive venue. We want to offer those fans that come in a little bit of everything, right? Whether it is, unique apparel, whether it is great collectibles, whether it's a huge collection of memorabilia, like people's collections that are on display that you can see, amazing collections, whether it's immersive experiences, whether it's stuff for the family, you start to put it together. It's it's a 12-hour day of fun that is all about your sports fandom in all different stripes, right? Whether it's a player or a team, whether it's collecting or it's experiences, whether it's talks and panels or it's hearing a podcast that's being done live by some of the most well-known podcast producers. Like it's got a little bit of everything. And I guarantee you that very few people will love everything, right? But if you're going for one or two things and you discover one or two things that you didn't know you were a fan of, we've done our job, right? And that's where the onboarding into the hobby comes in. You know, I came because I wanted to hear Tom Brady talk about entrepreneurialism, with Derek Jeter. And I'm a huge fan, and I wanted to see that, right? I wanted to see this Knicks reunion panel. I wanted to hear Eli talk about, great, Super Bowl winning Giants teams. Cool. And I discovered that then I could go buy the cards. Or I could get some dirt from the infield from Jeter's last game, right? Like, I discovered this whole world of collectibles and memorabilia. Or I discovered that Jimmy Butler has a coffee company. I had no idea. Like, you go down the list. That's what you're really hoping for. And events do that really well. They create these meaningful moments, right? They create deeper relationships than streaming something or a digital campaign. And that's where they may not reach as many people, but who they reach, it's an opportunity to build a deep relationship and to tell a story. And that's where I think, again, to come back to collecting in the hobby, that's where there's an opportunity that people are there to discover. And now we can take them by the hand and walk them through it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And obviously, Fanatics Collectibles, one of their stated goals is to 10x the number of collectors. And this has been a goal that's been out there for a year or so now. And there's been a lot of chatter about how the heck do they actually do that. And as you're describing this, I understand now how important this event is to that strategy, because this event is one of those moments where you can walk everyday sports fans in who, as you say, come in for another reason, come in to see, the Manning brothers on the stage or something like that, and then perhaps introduce them to the world of collecting while they're there and hopefully get them hooked.
Yep. And it happens. Again, I'm drawing off of my own experience because I spent a lot of time deep into these fan communities, but it happens in Comic-Con. Like, it's not just, it's comic dealers and comic artists and comic collectors, which are about as hardcore as card collectors and card dealers, right? But then you start to get into film and television and Japanese pop culture and toys, and go down the list. And you start to then see this cross-pollination, right? A person who came because they love comics didn't realize, that they also love anime. And now we've got an anime fan on your hands. And that sort of cross-pollination, that's discovery, is what's really exciting about these events. Which reminds me, it's probably worth just saying, like, we are catering to the hobby. Like, we will have some amazing exclusives from Topps, which we'll be talking about soon. We're creating essentially like a all-day trade night in kind of a environment at the show. We're building a stage again, but it's more interactive than a stage, but it's dedicated to the hobby. And it's a stage in the middle. There's chairs around it, but then there's tons of tables. So that instead of talking about how do you collect cards, like, let's put packs in people's hands that are there and show them, like, these are the differences. This is what all different types of cards are. This is how you collect them. This is what you're looking for. This is a base card versus, let's teach them. And so for 3 days, every hour the show is open, there'll be sessions happening. Some of them 101 and some of them, 401 sessions about collecting and about the hobby, where you're not just going to watch someone, you're going to get your hands on the stuff. You're going to actually do it. And that'll be right in the middle of the whole area that's dedicated to the hobby and dealers.
Interesting. That's going to be really fascinating. I wanted to dig in on the card side a little bit more, because obviously a lot of folks in our audience, they may be curious about the other stuff, but they may get drawn to this thing because of the cards, right? So I think I saw on the website 300 dealers. What is the scope? What is this from a card perspective for someone who's already a card collector today? What is this going to look like for them on the card side of this?
Yeah, I think the way I thought about it was, if we do our jobs well, it should be one of the largest card shows in the US that sits inside this much bigger sports immersive event. So we'll have 300-ish of amazing dealers that'll be present. Again, we'll have some really cool exclusives from Topps. There's a number of other brands from the hobby that are going to be there in a really significant way, doing some really cool stuff. So I think if you want to come for a card show, I think you're going to have an awesome card show, right? And again, there's a whole lot else outside of that sort of collector area that will be, I believe, you'll find something, and hopefully more than one thing that you're going to love. But if it's cards you want, you will find them. And I think you'll have a pretty amazing experience.
And this sounds very family friendly. You mentioned kids a couple of times. You see this being kind of an entire family type of event?
Yeah, when I talked about those different personas, like one of those key personas is we want parents and kids to come together. And that's a phenomenon you see at card shows all the time, right? The dad that kind of got the kid into cards, which got him back into cards, or vice versa. The kid got into cards, got the dad or the mom back into cards. We just love the idea of, if it's the kid that loves cards, there's other cool stuff for mom and dad to do. Vice versa, you know what I mean? If it's dad and mom that want to go collect, there'll be fun stuff for the kids to do too. We really want it to be a family event, for sure.
Yeah, really, really interesting. You mentioned trading, and trading sometimes is actually a controversial thing at certain card shows. Like there are card shows that actually prohibit trading at the card show, during the card show, because sometimes dealers complain. They feel like if people are trading with other people, maybe it's taking business away from themselves. I've always been a huge proponent of trading at card shows because I believe that card shows are meant to be an experience. They're meant to be a collector experience, and trading with each other is a huge part of the collector experience. We allow people here inside Cards HQ shop, we allow people to come inside our store and trade whenever they want to trade with each other. We're not offended by it. We're not upset about it as store owners, that if they sit down at the table and do a trade deal or even sell a card to somebody else who walks in and buys it off of them. I'm okay with that, because even if I'm not capturing the money from that, I'm saying the person who just came in had a cool interactive experience with another person who is here, and those people are going to come back, and eventually they're going to become loyal to our store, right? So I like that, but it is controversial. So what thought went into that, and is that truly going to be throughout the show that trading is going to be supported?
I completely agree with you, by the way. And if you think about, once dealers start moving in and they're coming to the show, they're trading. Like deals are getting done before the show opens between dealers, right? That's the way it goes. I mean, and it should. It's an ecosystem. Why not fans? Why not collectors as well? There's an incredibly, anymore, going to a live event is a totally irrational experience. It's a totally irrational thought, right? Like, you don't have to leave your house for anything anymore at all. I don't celebrate that, but you don't have to. So if you're going out the door and going anywhere, almost, certainly not anywhere mandatory, right? It's not the DMV or jury duty. You're going for fun. It needs to be a great experience. It needs to be exciting, entertaining, but also social. And what is trading and buying and selling amongst peers, right? Then social. Like, you have to have a conversation to discover what they have and what they're interested in and what you have. And that's what these events are about. You can do all of it virtually, but if there is an added layer of no, I met this guy and he's into the same thing I'm in, or we're into the exact opposite things, which is why we're great trade partners. Like those relationships. I have friends that were customers, randomly met at a New York Comic-Con in 2007. One of them came to my wedding. You know what I mean? He was a fan. But over the course of those years of always seeing each other at a couple of shows, lifelong friendships are built. And you never know when that's one sort of card trade away. And that's what these events are supposed to be for. So I'm giving a bit of a long answer to I could have just said, I agree with you, Geoff. You're right. Maybe I'll do that for the next one.
There's going to be a card museum as well. Did I read that?
Yeah, we're going to focus on, I think we realize that's a pretty big bite to take, where we're great collections of memorabilia. Where do you start? So what we're going to start to lean into is actually thinking about some of the athletes that are there, that are going to be in attendance. And in the end, we'll have probably about 200 total. let's pick some of those that are most famous or prolific and find folks that have great collections of their memorabilia.
Mhm.
So, and Derek Jeter's a great example. We're in New York. We don't want to be a local show, right? But we want to have a local element. And so, finding some folks that have unbelievable collections of Yankees memorabilia, Jeter memorabilia, and having a museum of that displayed. That's where we're going to kind of curate, I think, a little bit, which will be fun. It's like, again, it's a wonderful network within Fanatics where it's like somebody within Fanatics, within collectibles is like, no, I know a guy. I know a guy that has this unbelievable collection of fill in the blank. So it's finding those sort of folks, sleuthing them out, and then figuring out a cool way to put their amazing collection on display.
Yeah, very, very cool. Speaking of New York, you think this is always going to be in New York? Will this be an annual thing at this point?
Again, if I do my job well, this will be an annual thing. And then our vision is that we think probably two of these in the U.S. can exist. We want this to be a big show, and as a big event, it takes a lot of work. Not so much for us, but it takes a lot of work for brands, for athletes. You can't run 50 of them. Like, it's just not possible, right? The community in the industry won't support that. We think if we do it well, we think two in the U.S. We think there's some really interesting international markets as well that this concept could work in, and instead of serving a community of collectors and fans, it may help actually grow a community of collectors and fans. So it takes on a slightly different purpose. And then there's a couple other smaller events that we want to run as well. We're thinking about some in-venue events. So think about we're going to try and do one in Pittsburgh at PNC Park, where we'll do it live in the venue. Shamelessly stole this idea from Chris Costa and the Card Vault guys, where they do some cool stuff at Fenway and at Gillette. Just love that. Like just a small sort of collectible show with some experience, whether it's running the bases or taking a double off of, the outfield wall or something like that at a specific ballpark. We think that could be really fun to do some small versions of that. And again, it fits well with what Fanatics does. We run the retail in a lot of venues, sports venues around the U.S. And so for us to go to PNC where we do all the retail and say, hey, would you want to work with us on doing a small sort of fan event? That sounds really fun. So we'll spin up a couple of those as well.
Okay. And then I think you're doing more regional type shows, right? Am I correct in saying there's one coming to Orlando at the beginning of November?
You got it. If you think about this big show as really like 60 or 70% experience and entertainment and content, and then 30 to 40% is collecting. Really just flipping that model and looking at a couple of markets that we think are somewhat underserved and saying, let's do like a good local card show with some plus ups, right? With some experiential and some entertainment and, maybe one small stage instead of three, that gives a different flavor to it. And if you just kind of pan back a little bit, you're asking about the year leading up to this, by the end of this year, I'll have been at Fanatics for 18 months. We'll have run 4 events, 4 different types of events. The joint venture with WWE, this really big event, the venue in a ballpark, and a small regional card show. Our goal is just to see, what do people like? What works? What of these formats do people respond to? And then within these formats, what do they like? And that'll really shape what the years subsequently look like. What do we invest in? Where do we spend our time? What do we do that resonated with the fans? So this year has been a bit of a whirlwind kind of test and learn kind of year. So,
and if this Fanatics Fest in New York goes well in August, which I suspect it will, do you think that is a New York City thing, late summer every year? Or do you think there have been some people that have said, gosh, that's close to the National. That's asking a lot for the, for the dealers or even for the collectors to go to one and then go to another 3 weeks later?
Yeah, we've got some, I'll just speak candidly with you. We have some real challenges with the dates. Don't love being that close to the National. Do not love being on top of a great show out in Westchester, which is about 40 minutes from here. Jim Graham's show, which is awesome. We unfortunately don't get to choose our date. Like when you're working with a venue like the Javits, They're booked basically 85% to 90% of the year. And we come in and say, hey, we want 400,000 gross square feet of your building, which is basically, 75% of the entire venue. There just aren't that many openings. We wanted to be early fall, end of summer. It's just really tough to get a tenancy. So you end up choosing the least bad date. So to come around to your question directly, will this always be middle of August? I don't know. Once you're in the venue and you've got a date pattern, you have something to trade with, right? So there may be another piece of business in the building that wants to be in our date pattern. You're able to switch some things around or nudge some things back and forth. The key is getting those dates, and they're quite protective of who they allow into the venue, because it's their only asset is that building, and how they use it is got to fit in with their mission. And I can tell you, were we not Fanatics, we would not be in that venue. We would not have the ability to get access to that venue. And I know that firsthand. So we will play with the dates. We don't want to be on top of other great card shows. We don't want to be so close to the national. Once we get this off the ground, we'll be able to start to kind of look at how does that date pattern work and what our options might be.
Sure. Okay. Great info. All right, Lance. Well, let's wrap up on this. For somebody listening, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are now even more excited about this event. They want to get to New York City August 16th through 18th. What do they need to do now to be able to get there and be part of this?
Totally. So website is fanaticsfest.com. The tickets are available. Like, buy a ticket. We've announced probably 30% of the content and the brands and the guests that are coming. Over the next 30 days, we'll announce probably most of the rest of it. So it's only going to get better from here. I'd love for you to buy a ticket. It tells us we're on the right path. The other thing I would say is, like, if you have an idea or a question or a complaint or a caution, I want to hear from you. I really do. My email address is easy to find. It's first initial last name at fanatics.com. I mean it. Like, we are building this for this community and others, and I want to do it right. I am in the business of serving fans. That's my job. It has been for almost 20 years. Different types of fans, but at the end of the day, I'm in the business of making people happy and making passionate fans happy. So tell me how to do it. Tell me when I'm not doing it very well. Like, I am an absolutely open book. And want to hear about it, because I want to have fun in what I'm doing, and I have fun when other people are having fun. So, like, let's build something awesome together. Be a part of it.
Awesome. This has been great, Lance. Really appreciate you joining, and I know our audience is going to be excited as well. And I just want to remind our audience real quick that all of these episodes of The Geoff Wilson Show are available on YouTube in their full length on The Geoff Wilson Show channel on YouTube, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts under The Geoff Wilson Show. So make sure to subscribe everywhere. Thank you, Lance. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in New York in August.
It's a deal. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.